Casket empty, Genesis 40 and 41. This is Joseph's saga. I call it Dreams and Droughts. Covenant continues through God's providential care. Dreams. First of all, have you ever had dreams that were very significant where God was showing you something? I want to share with you something that about 30 years ago I dreamt about that was so significant to me and how God speaks to us through our dreams. I dreamed that I was walking along underneath what would have been the basement part or underneath the old Three Rivers Stadium with the big cement columns, and it was just all dilapidated. And then I was walking with a pastor friend representing God's spiritual love and care. And we walked into something that was so different, where the walls were lined with clear glass jars that were filled with brilliant colored little balls, like candy, but not candy. But it was beautiful and colorful and light and bright and peaceful. And I was told that God was showing me that what was old and past and dead, that now your life was going to be something new and bright and beautiful. And I was encouraged through times of difficulty, times of loss and pain, that there was a new beginning that God was providing for me. That was many years ago, but the dream is still very clear in my mind and what God was telling me. And now in Joseph's saga, where we have dreams, first of all, and then droughts, but we have God's providential care for his covenant people. Thinking about Joseph, remember the childhood stories many of us remember about Joseph. Such a colorful story. We're familiar with Joseph and his coat of many colors. Actually, the translation would be a coat with long sleeves. Or if your father gives you a coat with long sleeves, that would denote the inability to work in the fields. You can't work with long sleeves. Hence, the one wearing the coat recognizes as his father's favorite, he doesn't have to work like his brothers. So Joseph had these childhood dreams, and his brothers hated him. They were motivated by his own haughty self-conception as his father's favorite. Then the brothers plot misfortunes where he's sold as a slave and ends up in prison because of the falsehoods of Potiphar's wife. Joseph is a long way from home, a long way from family, and in prison. Here, dreams have often been used by God to lead us, as well as God's leaders and prophets, in the godly direction and decisions. And then I want to share with you from 40, where it says, sometime later, both the wine steward and the baker for the Egypt's king offended their master, the Pharaoh. He was angry with his two officers, the chief wine steward and the chief baker, and he put them under arrest with the commander of the royal guard in the same jail where Joseph was imprisoned. The commander of the royal guard assigned Joseph to assist them. After they had been under arrest for some time, both of them, the wine steward and the baker for Egypt's king, who were imprisoned in the jail, had dreams one night, and each man's dream had its own meaning. When Joseph met them in the morning, he saw them and they were upset. He asked the officers of Pharaoh, who were under arrest with him in his master's house, "Why do you look so distressed today?" And they answered, "We both had dreams, but there's no one to interpret them." And Joseph said to them, "Don't interpretations belong to God? Describe your dreams to me." The chief wine steward described his dream to Joseph. In my dream, there was a vine right in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. When it budded, the blossoms appeared, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, so I took the grapes, crushed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in Pharaoh's hand. Joseph said to him, "This is the dream's interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days. After 3 days, Pharaoh will give you an audience and return you to your position. You will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand just the way things were before when you were his wine steward. But please remember me when you are doing well and be loyal to me. Put in a good word for me to Pharaoh so he sets me free from this prison. I was stolen from the land of the Hebrews, and here too I have done nothing to be thrown into this dungeon." When the chief baker saw the interpretation was favorable, he said to Joseph, "It was the same for me. In my dream, there were 3 baskets of white bread on my head. In the basket on top, there were baked goods for Pharaoh's food, but birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." Joseph responded, "This is the dream's interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. After 3 days, Pharaoh will give you an audience and will hang you from a tree where birds will peck your flesh from you." The 3rd day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a party for all his servants. Before all of his servants, he gave an audience to the chief wine steward and the chief baker. He returned the chief wine steward to his position, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But the chief baker he hanged, just as Joseph had said would happen when he interpreted their dreams for them. But the chief wine steward didn't remember Joseph. He forgot all about him. Soon, in the land of Egypt, we're going to have an impending world crisis of a drought, or more exact, a famine. Famines were and still are frequent occurrences, not only in the biblical stories, but even present-day headlines, especially in areas that are subsistent living. Food insecurity can determine decisions affecting national policies, as we will see here in Joseph's story. It says 2 years later, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing near the Nile. In front of him, 7 healthy-looking, fattened cows climbed up out of the Nile and grazed on the reeds. Just then, 7 other cows, terrible-looking and scrawny, climbed up out of the Nile after them and stood beside them on the bank of the Nile. The terrible-looking, scrawny cows devoured the 7 healthy-looking, fattened cows. The Pharaoh woke up. He went back to sleep and had a second dream in which 7 ears of corn, full and healthy, grew on a single stalk. Just then, 7 ears of grain, scrawny and scorched by the east wind, sprouted after them, and the scrawny ears swallowed up the full and well-formed ears. Then Pharaoh woke up and realized it was a dream. In the morning he was disturbed and summoned all of Egypt's religious experts and all of its advisors. Pharaoh described his dreams to them, but they couldn't interpret them for Pharaoh. Then the chief wine steward spoke to Pharaoh. "Today, I've just remembered my mistake. Pharaoh was angry with his servants and put me and the chief baker under arrest with the commander of the royal guard. We both dreamed one night, he and I, and each of our dreams had its own interpretation. A young Hebrew man, a servant of the commander of the royal guard, was with us. We described our dreams to him, and he interpreted our dreams for us, giving us an interpretation for each dream. His interpretations came true exactly. Pharaoh restored me to my position, but hanged him. So Pharaoh summoned Joseph, and they quickly brought him from the dungeon. He shaved, changed his clothes, and appeared before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, but no one could interpret it. Then I heard that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Joseph answered Pharaoh, It's not me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable response. So Pharaoh tells Joseph all about the dream, and Joseph then said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh, you actually had one dream. God has announced to you what he is about to do. The 7 healthy cows are 7 years, and the 7 healthy grains are 7 years. It's actually one dream. The 7 thin and frail cows climbing up after them are 7 years. The 7 thin ears of grain scorched by the east wind are 7 years of famine. It's just as I told Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are now coming throughout the entire land of Egypt. After them, 7 years of famine will appear, and all of the abundance in the land of Egypt will be forgotten. The famine will devastate the land. No one will remember the abundance in the land because the famine that follows will be so very severe. The dream occurred to Pharaoh twice because God has determined to do it, and God will make it happen soon. So then Joseph boldly tells Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, what to do. Now, Pharaoh, you should find an intelligent, wise man and give him authority over the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh should appoint administrators over the land and take 1/5 of all the produce of the land during the 7 years of abundance. During the good years that are coming, they should collect all such food and store the grain under Pharaoh's control, protecting the food in the cities. This food will be reserved for the 7 years of famine to follow in the land of Egypt, so that the land won't be ravaged by famine. This advice seemed wise to Pharaoh and all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, Can we find a man with more God-given gifts than this one? And Pharaoh said to Joseph, Since God made all this known to you, no one is as intelligent and wise as you are. You will be in charge of my kingdom, and all my people will obey your command. Only as the enthroned king will I be greater than you. Pharaoh said to Joseph, Know this, I've given you authority over the entire land of Egypt. Pharaoh took his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand. He dressed him in linen clothes, and he put a gold necklace around his neck. He put Joseph on the chariot of his second in command, and everyone in front of him cried out, Attention! So Pharaoh installed Joseph over the entire land of Egypt. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh. No one will do anything or go anywhere in all the land of Egypt without your permission. Wow. Joseph has come a long way. So now the focus of our story is Joseph in Egypt. But soon it will return to Jacob in the land of Canaan, and how drought and famine changes the history of the Hebrews. In the chapters of Genesis so far, we've had two lengthy stories. First there was Abraham and then Jacob. Not much on Isaac. The covenant has been made with Father Abraham, and God renamed Jacob Israel and blessed him with grace and goodness. At the beginning of chapters 40 and 41, now about Joseph in the land of Egypt, first in prison, it seemed that he had reached the lowest point of his life. And then, by the providence of God, at the end of these chapters, Joseph is the master of all Egypt, second only to King Pharaoh himself. Joseph's elevation is due to his ability to understand and explain dreams, an ability which we are frequently reminded not from the wisdom of the mighty land in which he was exiled, but from the inspiration of the God of the Hebrews. Next week, the saga of Joseph and Jacob will continue. We kind of left on the edge of suspense. What is going to happen? Where is Jacob? Where are all the brothers? And now, in this class time, for the remaining time, discuss the questions about dreams and droughts or famines, and how God's providential care will sustain God's people of the covenant, because God is God. Amen.